This video is about Israel's struggle for survival in a hostile neighborhood. Subscribe for more. In the sweltering summer of 1948, the air crackled with tension in the newly formed state of Israel amidst the dusty streets of Jerusalem and the rolling hills of the Galilee, the scent of gunpowder mixed with the fragrance of blooming wildflowers, a bitter reminder of the volatile world outside. The sun bore down on the city's ancient walls, heralding both a new era and the dangers that came with it. The streets were alive with the sounds of footsteps hurriedly moving, and urgent conversations in Hebrew and Arabic echoed through the alleys, punctuated by the distant thuds of artillery fire. At the heart of this tumultuous landscape stood David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency and soon-to-be Israel's first prime minister. With furrowed brows and resolute determination, he paced back and forth in his modest office, surrounded by a court of advisors and military leaders. They were all too aware that the proclamation of the state had sparked a fierce conflict with neighboring Arab nations, all unwilling to recognize the existence of a Jewish homeland. The air was thick with foreboding as the news of skirmishes and territorial disputes filtered in. Among the advisors was Moshe Dayan, a soldier with an eye patch and an indomitable spirit, who had gained fame for his daring tactics in the struggle for independence. He understood the stakes all too well. "We cannot afford to falter," he declared, his voice steady. "The Arabs see this as their last chance to destroy us. If we don't stand together, we will be erased from the map." His words hung heavy in the air, stirring a mix of fear and resolve in the hearts of those gathered. Beyond the borders of Israel, the conflict reverberated throughout Europe. In Berlin, a city still grappling with the aftermath of World War II, memories of destruction lingered like ghosts. The once proud capital lay in ruins, divided into sectors controlled by the Allies. Among the rubble and the remnants of a shattered regime, a different struggle unfolded. German nationalist factions, disillusioned by defeat, began to rise again, seeking to reclaim lost power. They viewed the turmoil in Israel as an opportunity to rally support for a renewed militaristic agenda. In a dimly lit cafe surrounded by a group of like-minded individuals, Hans Semmelwehr, a former Wehrmacht officer, shared his vision of a new Germany. "We must not let ourselves be weak," he urged. "The Jews have taken our land and our pride. We must do what is necessary to restore our honor." His words ignited a fire in the hearts of those present, who longed for a return to a time when Germany had once commanded respect on the world stage. Meanwhile, in America, a nation emerging as a global superpower, sentiments regarding the conflict in the Middle East were mixed. President Harry S. Truman had extended recognition to Israel, yet voices of dissent echoed through the halls of Congress. The American public remained divided. Some viewed the Jewish state as a beacon of democracy, while others sympathized with the Arab plight. Within this tumult, a young journalist named Rachel Green found herself drawn to the story unfolding overseas. With her notebook in hand, Rachel boarded a plane for Tel Aviv, determined to capture the human experience of war in her writings. Her sharp pen had already chronicled the struggles of the European Jews during the Holocaust, and now she sought to shed light on the burgeoning conflict in Israel. As her plane touched down on the newly built runway, she was overtaken by a sense of purpose. Gazing out at the bustling city, she knew that history was being forged in the fires of conflict, and she was determined to bear witness. In the early days of the conflict, Rachel found herself amidst chaos. The streets were alive with fervor. Soldiers, both young and old, marched with rifles slung over their shoulders, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. The Israeli Defense Forces were a patchwork of volunteers, veterans of World War II, Holocaust survivors, and newly arrived immigrants, all united under a single banner. They were fighting not just for territory but for survival. As she navigated the crowded streets, Rachel met a young soldier named Likorn. His passion for his homeland was palpable, yet shadows haunted his eyes. "Every day I wake up wondering if it will be my last," he confided to Rachel, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I fight because I believe in this land, in our right to exist." Lee's words resonated with Rachel, solidifying her resolve to tell the story of a people fighting against all odds. On the front lines, the battle for Jerusalem raged. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting fiery hues across the sky, Moshe Dayan surveyed the landscape. His tactical mind raced with calculations. The Arab forces were advancing, and each moment became critical. The sound of gunfire echoed through the canyons, and the urgent cries of soldiers filled the air. Flashes of light from distant artillery marked the struggle for control, while civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, praying for safety. Dayan's strategy hinged on surprise and mobility. "We can let them encircle us," he barked orders to his men. "Flank them at night, use the element of surprise." His voice carried authority, igniting the spirit of the troops around him. They moved quickly, shadows against the twilight, ready to engage in the fight for their existence. As the sun sank, a sense of urgency gripped the Israeli forces. The tension of the night loomed like a dark cloud over the city. Just as they prepared to launch their counteroffensive, a rumble echoed from the distance. A convoy of Arab tanks hurtled toward their position, the ground trembling beneath the weight of impending violence. The stage was set for confrontation, a battle that would test the mettle of both sides. Rachel, stationed at an observation point, felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She scribbled notes furiously, capturing the urgency of the moment. The conflict was no longer just a story, it was a living, breathing entity, with lives hanging in the balance. As the first shots rang out, she knew she was witnessing history unfold, with the clash of arms erupting, and the fate of nations teetering on the brink. The stakes reached a boiling point. In the heart of Jerusalem, amidst the chaos of war and the cries for survival, alliances would be forged, betrayals would sting, and the struggle for the future of Israel would unfold against the backdrop of a world still healing from the scars of its past. As the night deepened, the air carried the bittersweet taste of uncertainty. Would Israel rise from the ashes of conflict, or would it succumb to the violence and hatred that surrounded it? As the first shots were fired and the world held its breath, the journey for survival had only just begun. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battered landscape of Jerusalem. The tension crackled in the evening air like electricity. As the first shots rang out, Moshe Dayan's heart raced with the knowledge that the fight for survival had truly begun. He peered through his binoculars, scanning the enemy lines just as the Arab tanks rolled into view. Each rumble of their engines sent waves of fear through the Israeli defense forces, but Dayan's resolve hardened. They could not falter, they would not give in. He shouted, his voice cutting through the din of chaos. Soldiers scrambled into formation, adrenaline surging as they prepared to face the advancing threat. The elderly men and women cowered in the shadows of their homes, praying for miracles, while the young men and women of Israel steeled themselves for combat. Among the fighters was Lee Cohen, who had grown up in the shadows of conflict. He was no stranger to violence, but the reality of a full-scale war bore down on him like a heavy weight. As Lee took his position, he caught sight of Rachel Green scribbling feverishly in a notebook, her eyes darting between the unfolding battle and the pages she filled with the stories of those around her. She called, her voice strained yet determined. "There is no plan other than survival," he replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "We have to hold the line for each other, for our families." She nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment as she witnessed the resolve etched on his face. The clash of arms erupted into a frenzied cacophony, punctuated by shouts and the metallic clang of artillery. In the shadows of the street, the Israeli soldiers prepared to counter the oncoming tanks, their determination a stark contrast to the fear that gnawed at their hearts. Just outside the city, the Arab forces advanced with strategic intent, their leaders emboldened by a sense of righteous fury against the new state. Among them was Khalid al-Farouk, a commander known for his clever maneuvers. He had been given orders from the higher-ups, fueled by a belief that this was their moment to crush the nascent nation. "We will show them the consequences of their existence," he vowed to his men, his voice a thunderous echo of conviction. As the two forces collided, the battlefield transformed into a surreal dance of destruction. Explosions rocked the earth, sending dirt and debris into the air, while the cries of the fallen reverberated through the chaos. Elite rifle raised, fired shot after shot, aiming not just for survival but for hope. Each time he pulled the trigger, he whispered a prayer for peace, a desperate wish for an end to the violence that engulfed their lives. In an unexpected turn, the Israeli forces managed to flank the advancing tanks, utilizing the darkness as their ally. Dayan had ordered a counterattack under the cover of night, and the element of surprise was on their side. As the first Israeli soldiers launched their assault, the sounds of gunfire intensified, mingling with the shouts of disbelief from their opponents. The brutal cacophony was punctuated by the sight of explosions lighting up the night sky. Rachel's heart raced as she captured the chaos in her notes, the ink blurring in her trembling hands. She was not just a spectator, she was part of a story that transcended borders. The truth of war was raw and unfiltered, and she was determined to share it with the world. Above the din of battle, a voice broke through. "The tanks, focus on the tanks," Dayan shouted, rallying his troops. The soldiers responded, their training kicking in as they zeroed in on the armored giants advancing toward their positions. Each soldier felt the weight of history resting on their shoulders, and they pushed forward, driven by a sense of duty and desperation. As the first tank fell to the ground, erupting in flames, a collective cheer erupted among the Israeli ranks. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of war, but it ignited a spark of hope. Lee felt a surge of adrenaline as he fought side by side with his comrades, each bullet fired an act of defiance against the forces that sought to erase their existence. In America, President Truman sat in his office, reviewing the latest updates from the Middle East. The war had sparked heated discussions among his advisors, each vying for influence over the direction of U.S. foreign policy. "We cannot abandon Israel," one advisor urged, emphasizing the moral obligation to support the fledgling state. The discussions were fraught with tension as the political landscape was shifting like quicksand beneath their feet. On the other side of the Atlantic, Hans Himmler plotted in the shadows of Berlin. The former Wehrmacht officer had assembled a group of nationalists, hoping to capitalize on the chaos in Israel to resurrect nationalist sentiment in Germany. "If we can show strength abroad, we can reclaim our nation as pride at home," he proclaimed to his followers, eyes blazing with conviction. "The Jews are our enemy. Their success will only fuel our shame." Back in Israel, the battle raged on. The Israeli forces pushed forward, their resolve tested with each passing moment. Moshe Dayan led a daring charge, rallying his troops with fervor. "For our homes, for our future," he yelled, the fervent energy igniting their spirits. As they advanced, the sounds of warfare transformed into a symphony of life and death. Flashes of light illuminated the night sky, marking the struggle for existence that was unfolding in real time. Rachel, amidst the chaos, felt the weight of her pen as she chronicled the human experience, each life intertwined with the fate of a nation. She could taste the fear, the bravery, the desperation, and the love that compelled these men and women to fight. Suddenly, a sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath her, and Rachel stumbled, barely avoiding the shrapnel that flew through the air. He turned and rushed toward her, his instincts kicking in. "Get down," he shouted as he pulled her to safety behind a barricade. Their eyes locked, and in that fleeting moment, the chaos around them faded, leaving only the undeniable connection forged through their shared struggle. As dawn began to break, the battle showed no signs of letting up. The Israeli forces, emboldened by their earlier success, pressed on, but the Arab troops were relentless, bloodied yet undeterred. Each side was resolute, fighting not just for land but for identity, for survival, and for the legacy they would leave behind. In the heart of Jerusalem, the struggle for a nation continued to unfold, with lives forever marked by the choices made in moments of terror and bravery. With the sun rising over the horizon, illuminating the destruction left in the wake of war, a question loomed larger than ever: would this struggle for survival unite them or tear them apart? The answer lay just ahead as the world watched with bated breath, eager to see if Israel would emerge from the shadows of conflict to claim its place in history or become another casualty of a world still haunted by its past. The stage was set for higher stakes, and as the winds of war howled through the streets of Jerusalem, the next chapter of this epic saga waited its moment to unfold. As the sun's first rays broke through the smoke-laden horizon, illuminating the battlefield in shades of orange and gold, the struggle in Jerusalem raged on with a ferocity that left no room for doubt. The Israeli forces, emboldened by their hard-won victories, pressed forward, their determination igniting a firestorm of hope in a seemingly impossible situation. Yet, amid the chaos, the shadows of desperation loomed large. Lee Cohen, breathless from the intensity of the fight, moved through the rubble, his heart pounding not just from the combat but from the realization of what was at stake. Each step felt heavy, grounded by the weight of history and expectation. "We are more than soldiers," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are people." As he advanced, the cries of the wounded echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder that the cost of freedom was paid in blood. Rachel Green, crouched behind a dilapidated wall, frantically scribbled notes, her heart racing. Capturing the bravery and fear surrounding her became her lifeline amid the cacophony of battle. "This is history in the making," she thought, even as a nearby explosion rattled her bones. The duality of her position as witness and participant compelled her to craft a narrative that would resonate across continents. She longed to share the human element of war, the faces behind the statistics, the stories that bore witness to their struggles and triumphs. In the distance, the sound of artillery fire erupted, a chilling reminder that the fight was far from over. Moshe Dayan, surveying the terrain, felt a surge of adrenaline as he gathered his commanders for a briefing. "We've gained ground, but the enemy will retaliate," he warned, his voice steady. "We must be prepared for their counteroffensive. Every moment counts." His piercing gaze swept over the faces of his men, igniting a fire in their hearts. "Sir, what's our next move?" one soldier asked, his brow furrowed with worry. Dayan clenched his fists, his mind racing. "From there, we can control the flow of reinforcements and supplies." We have to cut off their access to the main roads." The men nodded, understanding the gravity of the plan. It was not just about territory, it was about the very survival of the state they had fought so hard to establish. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in Washington, D.C., President Truman faced mounting pressure. His advisors debated the complexities of the conflict, weighing the implications of continued support for Israel against the risks of inflaming Arab sentiment. "President, we cannot afford to lose our influence in the Middle East," one aide cautioned. "Supporting Israel may alienate our allies in the Arab world." Truman's brow furrowed as he stared out the window, contemplating the gravity of the decisions at hand. "But we have a moral obligation to stand by those who fight for their freedom," he replied, his voice resolute. The stakes were high, and he understood that history would judge his actions. Back in Jerusalem, the call to arms echoed through the streets as Dayan prepared his troops for the next phase of the battle. "Tonight, we take the hills," he declared, rallying the men with passion. "For every inch we gain, we ensure our future." The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifted by his words. They moved swiftly, shadows blending into the darkening landscape as they approached the strategic points that would change the tide of the battle. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, the Israeli forces launched their assault on the hills. The night air crackled with tension, each heartbeat a reminder of the stakes. Lee and his comrades moved stealthily, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. "Stay low, stay together," he urged, recalling the training that had prepared them for moments of chaos. The time for talk was over, the moment for action had arrived. In the Arab camp, Khalid al-Farouk sensed the impending attack. His instinct screamed at him to prepare for the worst. "They are coming," he shouted, gathering his men. "We will not allow them to take our land. Hold your positions." The fierce determination in his voice echoed through the ranks, igniting a fierce resolve among his soldiers. They scrambled to ready their defenses, knowing that the outcome of this battle could shift the balance of power in the entire region. As the two forces collided amidst the darkness, the air erupted with the sound of gunfire and explosions. The once still night transformed into a chaotic battlefield, illuminated by flashes of light as bullets whizzed through the air. Lee found himself in the thick of the fight, adrenaline surging as he fought alongside his compatriots. "For our families, for our future," he shouted, his spirit unyielding as he pressed forward. Rachel, perched precariously on a hillside, struggled to maintain her composure as she documented the clash. Chaos unfolded before her like a living tapestry of humanity, raw and unfiltered. She felt the weight of her pen as she wrote furiously, capturing the essence of bravery and despair interwoven in each soldier's struggle. She understood that her words would bear witness to their sacrifice, a testament to a people facing annihilation. As the Israeli forces surged up the hillside, the battle intensified. Moshe Dayan fought valiantly alongside his men, his tactical brilliance shining amid the chaos. "Press on, we cannot let them regroup," he yelled, directing the soldiers with precision. The hill became a microcosm of the broader war, every inch fought for with fervor, every breath taken in desperation. In the throes of combat, a sudden explosion shattered the night. Lee stumbled, thrown off balance as chaos erupted around him. The world spun, disorienting him, yet he quickly regained his footing. He spotted Rachel, still documenting the battle, her face glowing with determination despite the peril surrounding her. "Stay down," he shouted, rushing towards her. "Lee, I need to get this..." Rachel began, but he cut her off. "Your story won't matter if you read it." He grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety behind a nearby boulder, adrenaline coursing through him as the fight continued unabated. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a connection formed, the bond forged in the crucible of war. As they crouched together, the sounds of battle faded into a distant roar, the chaos momentarily silenced by the urgency of their shared struggle. Lee's heart raced not just from the fight, but from the newfound understanding that their lives were intertwined in this struggle for survival. "We need to survive this, Rachel," he urged, his voice a fierce whisper. The battle waged on, fierce and unrelenting. Dayan's forces pressed forward against the Arab lines, determination fueling their advance. Khalid al-Farouk, despite the chaos, rallied his men, refusing to retreat. He shouted, his voice carrying through the tumult. The night stretched on, a brutal contest of wills as the two sides collided, neither willing to yield. As dawn approached, the sound of the conflict echoed through the hills, but a sense of resolve began to emerge on the Israeli side. They were fighting for their right to exist, for the nation they had dreamed of in the depths of despair. Each moment brought them closer to the realization that this struggle was not just a battle of arms, but a fight for identity and legacy. In the distance, a faint glimmer of hope began to break through the clouds as the first light of day illuminated the battlefield. It cast long shadows across the bodies strewn across the earth, a stark reminder of the cost of war. The sun's rays pierced through, illuminating the faces of those who had fought fiercely for a cause larger than themselves. Yet the story was far from over. As the dawn unfolded, both sides prepared for the next chapter of their struggle. With every heartbeat, the stakes continued to rise, and the world watched as history unfolded before their eyes. What would the coming day reveal? Would it forge new alliances, or would it deepen the enmity that had long plagued the region? As the sun rose higher, casting light upon the scorched earth, the question loomed larger than ever. In a world torn by war and division, could a fragile peace emerge from the ashes of conflict, or would the flames of hatred continue to engulf them all? The answer awaited, just beyond the rising sun. As the rising sun bathed the battlefield in a harsh, unforgiving light, the Israeli forces prepared for another relentless day of conflict. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and desperation, a bitter reminder of the sacrifices made in the previous night's brutal clash. Eli Cohen steadied himself, heart racing as he surveyed the remnants of the skirmish. The ground was strewn with debris, and the faces of comrades bore the marks of fatigue and determination. They were resilient people, forged in the fires of conflict. Lee turned to Rachel Green, who was still furiously writing in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They can keep this up forever," he said, hoping to instill a sense of hope amidst the despair. "We're regaining ground. We have to believe that this fight is worth it." His words, laced with conviction, echoed in the air between them. Rachel looked up, the weight of his gaze compelling her. "Ali, every word I write will reflect the truth of this moment. The world needs to see this every sacrifice, every act of bravery," she replied, her determination unwavering. In the distance, the sun glinted off the metal of the Arab tanks, a stark reminder that the enemy had not been defeated. The forces were regrouping, preparing for another assault. Moshe Dayan, having rallied his troops for the imminent conflict, stood resolute, his presence commanding respect. "We've endured the night, we've shown them our strength. Now we must finish what we started," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of a nation's hopes and dreams. The soldiers cheered, their spirits ignited by Dayan's words, sharing in the collective resolve to protect their homeland. They were not merely soldiers, they were defenders of a dream that had been decades in the making, a vision of a sanctuary for people who had endured unimaginable suffering. As they moved into formation, the tension mounted, palpable like the charged air before a storm. In the Arab camp, Khalid al-Farouk sensed the urgency of the moment. The Israeli counterattack had caught them off guard, and their morale had wavered. "We will not be defeated by these invaders," he shouted to his troops, rallying them with fervor. "We fight for our land, our people, our future. They are mere usurpers." His words stoked the fires of national pride, fueling a fierce determination to reclaim lost territory. As the two sides prepared for the next confrontation, the eyes of the world were cast toward the war-torn region. In America, President Truman's administration was under increasing pressure to respond to the escalating violence. "President, we cannot ignore the bloodshed," an advisor urged, the desperation in his voice palpable. "Supporting Israel is not just a moral obligation, it is a strategic necessity. We must show our commitment." Truman's brows knitted with concern. "We risk igniting further conflict in the already volatile region," he replied. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him, history hung in the balance, and he understood that his actions would resonate for generations. Back in Jerusalem, the moment of reckoning arrived. As the sun fully ascended, illuminating the battlefield, the Israeli forces launched their coordinated assault. Eli took his place among his fellow soldiers, adrenaline surging as they charged toward the enemy lines. He shouted, his heart pounding in rhythm with the footsteps of his comrades. The clash erupted with new ferocity, the sound of gunfire mingling with the cries of the wounded. Rachel, now positioned behind a barricade, documented the chaos with a fervor that matched the intensity of the conflict. Each bullet fired, each life lost, became part of her narrative, a reflection of the struggle for survival and the quest for identity. As the battle wore on, the Israeli forces managed to gain ground, pushing back the Arab troops. Dayan's tactical brilliance shone as he maneuvered his soldiers with precision, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's lines. "We hold the advantage, but we must not relent." His voice cut through the clamor of war, inspiring unwavering loyalty. In a desperate push, Khalid ordered a counteroffensive. "Regroup. Hold your positions. We cannot let them take what is ours." To the Arab soldiers, fueled by desperation and a fierce sense of duty, launched themselves at the advancing Israelis, determined to reclaim the hills that held strategic value. The earth shook beneath the weight of the conflict, and Ali found himself in the heat of battle once more, his rifle raised, taking aim. "This is for our future," he yelled, his voice mingling with the cries of countless others who fought for their homes, their families, their lives. As the two forces collided, the toll of war became painfully evident. Bodies lay strewn across the battlefield, a stark testament to the sacrifices made by both sides. In the midst of the chaos, a familiar face appeared before Ali. Rachel had moved closer to the front lines, her notebook still in hand. "You shouldn't be here," he shouted, concern etching his features. "It is too dangerous, though I need to show the world our truth, Aline." She insisted, her resolve fierce as the battle raged around them. "This is our story, But as she spoke, the ground erupted beneath them, a nearby explosion sending shockwaves through the air. Ali dove for Rachel, pulling her behind a wall just as debris flew overhead. "You have to stay safe," he urged, panic rising within him. Their eyes locked, and amidst the chaos, an unspoken bond emerged, a recognition of shared purpose in a world consumed by conflict. As the day wore on, the Israeli forces, fueled by a sense of urgency, pressed into the heart of the enemy position. They fought not just for land but for the very essence of their young nation. With each inch gained, the spirits of the soldiers soared. Yet they were reminded that the cost of freedom was steep, and the price of victory came with heavy losses. Amidst this turmoil, the world witnessed the unfolding drama. In Washington, D.C., Truman's resolve strengthened as he watched the news reports of the unfolding violence. "We must support our allies," he proclaimed, determination etched in his expression. "We cannot forsake those who fight for their right to exist." And so, as hours dragged on, the battle raged with no clear victor in sight. Amidst the sound of gunfire and the cries of the wounded, the Israeli forces pushed ever forward until they reached a critical turning point. The Arab forces began to show signs of faltering, and the tide began to shift. In a final desperate surge, Dayan rallied his men with one last call to arms. "For our home, for our future." His voice rang out as they launched a relentless assault, forcing the enemy to retreat. The hills were finally theirs, a victory etched into the annals of their history. As the dust settled and the echoes of conflict faded, Rachel looked on, her heart heavy with the realization of what had transpired. She felt the weight of their story, the pain, the loss, and the incredible bravery displayed on all sides. "This is history," she whispered, knowing she would share this truth with the world. In the aftermath of the battle, as the sun began to dip once again, Ali stood alongside his comrades, their faces marked by exhaustion but illuminated by the warmth of their hard-fought victory. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged triumphant, bearing the scars that would forever remind them of the struggle. In the distance, the city of Jerusalem stood resilient, a testament to the hope that could bloom even amidst the ruins of war. As the winds of change swept through the region, the question remained, would peace find its way into the hearts of the people, or would the cycle of conflict continue to haunt them? The world held its breath, the outcome uncertain, but the spirit of survival burned bright. Those who fought for Israel were not merely warriors, they were visionaries, dreamers of a future where their existence would no longer be threatened by enmity. The journey was far from over, but their resolve to carve out a place in history would forge the path ahead. They had fought to survive, and now they would fight to thrive, united in purpose, forever anchored in the rich tapestry of their story.